Rev up your engines!
Carl9212 says, what do you think of Toyota Yaris LE with 79,000 miles? Are these little guys reliable? Well, they're relatively reliable, but realize the Yaris is really more of a Mazda. It's a Mazda engine that's in that thing. Toyota didn't make the engines, they use Mazda engines. And they're okay. They're not really nearly as reliable as Toyota engines, but they can be okay. And you bought one that's 79,000 miles. It still should last quite a bit of time. I just hope you didn't pay too much. Ernesto Flores says, Scotty, what do you think is the best minivan in the market right now? Toyota Sienna, bar none. I got customers at 500,000 miles on those things with original engines and transmissions. They really are the best. You're going to pay more for them, and you buy a used one, it's going to cost more, but they really last a really long time. It's the same V6 engine that they use in the Camry and their pickup trucks and stuff. It's tried and true, and it can run forever. You can't beat it. Sandra Luke says, Scotty, I'm considering getting either a 2002 Saab 9.3 Vigan or an 05 Nissan 350Z in my next car. Thoughts on these cars? Well, if you got a choice between those two, get the Nissan 350Z. Those are pretty well-built sports cars. They get a little high-tech and a little expensive as they age, but if it's a standard transmission, yes, they're really strong. Now, if it's an automatic, I wouldn't buy either of those cars. I would never buy a Saab. The company went bankrupt years ago. Their cars are impossible to work on, require super expensive parts. The only way you could even think about buying a car like that is if you live in Sweden. If you live in Sweden, from what people tell me there's still parts are readily available and they still make them. And there's Swedes that are nuts about car because it's their homeland car and they fix them for a reasonable price. But anywhere else, do not buy a Saab. Raul Wooter says, Scotty, I drive a new Hyundai Kona 2018. Why are the cars so pearly painted on the inside? Yeah, Korean cars, hey, they've always been known as being a little bit on the junky side. Now, they're not as bad as a lot of those Russian cars. I mean, those are really cheaply made. They just, the cheaper ones, they're not putting that much money into them. They're not finished that well. They're selling them low, and that's what you get. You get a low-priced car. Now, I mean, they're little. They can still last a while. They're not going to last like a Toyota or a Honda, but they're not finished all that well, the cheaper ones. Now, the higher-end ones are much better. I got customers with the V6 high-end ones, and they run fine and everything. And, like I said, they don't last as long as a Toyota or a Honda, but the high-end ones aren't that bad. They're pretty, a lot of them have luxury leather interiors, but those cheaper ones, they're just cheaply made. They're a cheap car, one of the lowest ones out there. Matthew B says, what do you think about older V8 Chevy Silverados, maybe around the year 2003? I'd go even earlier myself. The older they are, the better made they were. That's pretty much it for GM. If you really want to go back in the 60s and 70s, they were making killer pickup trucks then that could run forever. They were really better made. Then they started to make the engines a little bit cheaper and smaller and stuff like that. But yeah, the older they are, the better made they were. They're always better, though, with those with the V8s. The V6, yeah, they're always kind of weak and didn't hold up. But the V8s were the strongest mark on those. Yeah, but 07 says, Scotty, I had a front and rear end collision. Hood, front fenders, bumpers, radiator damage. You think it's worth the repair? I don't know if it's worth the repair. Okay, should have given me more info, like the year and the mileage and all that stuff. When the damage that far, they're generally not worth fixing. Now, depends on how old it is, what you want to do with it, too. I've had plenty of guys, when I was going to college, cars smash up, they go to a junkyard, they'd bolt a piece on, they'd hope it worked, they'd duct tape the bumpers on with duct tape. Hey, I mean, if they still ran, they didn't care, But if you want a reliable, good, solid car, when it's that far, it's usually a smart idea to just say forget it and get rid of the stupid thing when it's smashed up that far. You want some cookies? I got an 02 E46 33 OCI with 110,000 miles. The chassis starting to crack at the differential mount point. What options do I have? Find a good welding shop. Any good welder can weld things together. Here's the thing. Welds, when done correctly by a pro, are actually stronger than the thing they're welding together. So if you get a good welder, it'll be stronger than it was in the first place. The hassle's going to be finding somebody who wants to do welding on that BMW because most guys don't want to mess around with those things. Things can be welded, so you can find a good welder. But you got to find a good welder because it's expertise. The metal has to be melted and it has to be shielded by an inert gas, and it has to be done just correctly so that it melts both what you're welding and the welding material that you're putting in there, then it becomes one solid piece. It's an art and a science, so you got to find a good welder to do that. Otherwise, just get rid of the car. Bill McNeil says, I got a 94 Jeep 4-cylinder. It needs a CPU. Can a 6-cylinder CPU work? No. The computer is set up for a particular design of car. If it's a 4-cylinder, it's set up for a 4-cylinder. If it's an automatic, it's set up for an automatic. If it's a standard, it's set up for a standard. If it's a 6, it's set up for a 6. If it's an 8, it's set up for an 8. You can't just swap them because the computer programming are set up that way, and that's a 94. And it's so old, you can't reprogram them. The new ones, you can have it all erased and reprogrammed. A lot of those would work, but that's not even reprogrammable. It would not work. Don't try it. You got to find one from a 4-cylinder one if you want it to run right.
So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.